Hello everybody, it's me again, Craig Marr. We're going to be talking about the King's Indian defense today. One of the ways that you want to make master is to practice sound openings. One of these is the King's Indian defense, primarily played against 1d4. The great thing about this opening is whatever white plays, you can get into this particular setup. Now, why do I really highly recommend this setup? It's because it's been played by the greatest players on earth. Bobby Fischer loved the King's Indian. Garry Kasparov played the King's Indian. Virtually every single top player, including Vasily Smyslov, Mikhail Botvinnik, Mikhail Tal, just about every Walter Brown, just about every strong player has tried the King's Indian at one time or another. And I've played it many times too, and I like it. It's not really a defense, it's more like a counterattack, See, I'm not that interested in defense. I like to attack, I like to seize the initiative. And the King's Indian is one of the most active, it's a fighting defense, Now, you can play this setup white or black. Fischer liked it so much he would play knight f3, g3 as white. And, so this is all around just a very good formation for you guys to learn and to start out with. Now, the problem with most people is after you get to the first 5 moves, now what do you do? What do you do, with the rest of your pieces? That's going to be the problem that most players are confronted with. Is okay, right after the opening, now what do I do? Now what do I do with the rest of these pieces, Okay. Today we're going to learn something new, which most masters know about, but which isn't in any of the books. And this is pretty advanced, so I like to give you guys some master level material once in a while. And in the 40 or 50 years I've been playing chess, I learned the question for today is, what is the least valuable pawn on the board? Let's say I have to give up a pawn. Maybe I got a little bit of a difficult position. Should I give up the center pawn? Should I give up the pawn that's kind of close to the king? Now that looks like it exposes the king. Okay. Well, in my 40 or 50 years of tournament practice and general play, here's the answer. Dun 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 dun. If I could give away a pawn at the start of the game, which pawn would I give up? Here's your answer. I'd give up this one. This is the pawn that I would give up at the beginning of the game. And why would I do that? Well, I have all kinds of compensation with the open file, but supposing both sides are castled king side, isn't my king a little bit exposed? Yes, that is true. But when we get to the end game, it's going to be play on the other side of the board, the center and the queen side, which is more important than this missing pawn. So in the game that in our featured game, we're going to see that black, that's me, I give up my H pawn. And the guy says, oh, I'm up a pawn, but he doesn't realize that it's a worthless extra pawn. And that is one of the lessons that we're going to glean from today's game. And we're also going to see how I play the King's Indian defense. I had the black pieces in this game against a player rated 1825 with a time control of 5 minutes with 5-second increments. So he opened up with d4, knight f6, knight f3, g6, g3, bishop g7, bishop g2, castles, castles. So this here for white is called the fianchetto variation of this against the King's Indian. And so here we have the first 5 moves that I know that most of you can easily make, and these 5 moves are easy to memorize. But what happens after that is more difficult for most players. Okay, I've got the basic setup. Now what do I do with this guy? What do I do with this guy? What do I do with my pawns? Should I play c5? Should I play e5? Or should I play knight c6? You know, what do I do now, you know? Well, let us, you know, see what black should do. What is the correct setup? Now you can come here with a knight, but this is the normal move for the knight. I know I'm blocking the bishop, but this is still the book move here. So far, both sides have played all the standard moves from this variation. Now the purpose of c6 is I want to develop my queen to a more aggressive square. See, right now the queen is passive, so c6 is a very good move. e4. And now we have 2 ways to challenge the center. We can play c5, which is bad, because now d5, and then I can't really, you know, get any counterplay. So this is the correct way to play this formation in general. This formation will work against just about any white setup, whether you have fianchetto or whether the bishop is here. This is a good all-round setup. Or you can set up with a knight on c6 and then also play e5. Pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. Now usually this setup doesn't really, you know, lead to anything because you have this hole here, and I'm going to be looking to put my knight in this hole for the rest of the game. And I usually get it through knight c5, knight e6, and then I'm ready to parachute. So you got to look at the holes. Remember, we were discussing that the knight should always attack holes. And this square is not defended by a pawn, so that's a hole. Now this is kind of a lemon because it doesn't really do anything, because if you take the knight, you're giving up the 2 bishops. So this bishop now becomes kind of a target. It doesn't have a home, so I just keep attacking the bishop. And now in the King's Indian, this is often a lot of people will play here, but that's an inferior square. This is the right square because I'm hitting knight here and then knight here to take advantage of the hole. Check. Have to go back. Now you may be worried about this pawn, but in the King's Indian, a lot of these pawns are held because of that bishop. If he takes the pawn, maybe I take his pawn, and then I capture the knight. So instead of trading down, he decides to go here. Now the computer recommends queen d3, which is a very good move that wins, forces the trade of queens. Notice that once my queen gets here, his queen is pretty much checkmated, has nowhere to go. But anyway, there's really nothing special in my opinion, for white in this position. So I have to guard this pawn. Now I could either guard it this way or guard it this way. So you're wondering, why did I guard it that way? Well, because when I move the knight here, I don't want this pawn to be captured. Whereas if I bring the queen here, I can't go back like that. So queen c7 is interesting. Bishop e3, attacking the knight. And I go back to where I originally wanted to go. Now he has a dangerous side, sort of a side center building up. So whenever your opponent has a strong central, or has a strong pawn in the middle of the board, you want to break it up. Always break up strong pawn formations. Pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. So I've accomplished the objective of getting rid of his most dangerous and far advanced pawn. Now he seizes the open file. And now, what's going on with that move? Well, maybe I want to maneuver the knight over here and put my bishop over here. But of course, above all, I don't want to play a move like c5, because that opens up a hole here, it opens up a hole here, and it would pretty much ruin the position for black. So I want to always keep this pawn here on c6 to control his knight's movement. Okay, so now he's trying to put pressure on that pawn, So I simply keep developing my pieces, And now the game is about even, but he thinks that he sees a very strong move. Doesn't that win, material? Because if I retreat my queen, he simply takes and wins a pawn. So I captured here, and now we have an end game after queen takes queen, knight takes queen, this is forced, rook takes knight, and now it looks like white is going to win material, because it seems like I have to protect the knight or move the knight. And then this pawn is going to fall. So it looks like I'm in trouble. But I found a very good move. Bishop d4 is good. Now the idea of this is I'm trying to tempt him to capture that pawn. And remember, we're talking about which pawn can I give up and still have a good game. The rook pawn, the h pawn. So I'm really tempting him to capture. He should be capturing this pawn. That's the better pawn to capture, see. If he takes the knight, I'm going to take the bishop, and then bishop here, and then I'm going to win that pawn, and then it's going to be equal. So I got him to play the move I really wanted him to play. I suckered him into bishop h6, which isn't really very good. Now white's going to win the pawn, but there's going to be all kinds of compensation. All kinds of compensation. So I'm very happy to capture this. He has to take the knight. And now this is hella strong here. This is very strong, because now I have a passed pawn ready to create some dangerous threats. This is hanging, so he has to protect. Now this is hanging, so I simply protect. Now he wants to free the rook, but now this pawn is getting dangerous down here. Thanks for the free tempo, my friend. He's just lost the tempo. Now the pawn is getting very, very dangerous, and it looks like in a bad position he blunders, because now d2, and now it's over, because this pawn is going to queen and he's going to be down the exchange. So White resigned here. And thanks for watching. Bye.